The hum of distant generators echoed through the corridor. Harsh, white lights buzzed overhead. The medbay hallway was utilitarian. No color, no warmth, no distractions. Every panel served a function. Every square meter accounted for. There were no windows until the very end. Just one room with a view. Observation Ward A17. Dr. Mason Riker walked briskly down the corridor, dark boots clapping against the polished flooring. He carried no unnecessary equipment, only a compact med tablet tucked under one arm and a sealed trauma pack in his free hand. His uniform was functional, slate gray with a black collar marked by the Earth Federation Medical Corps insignia. His short dark hair was unkempt from long hours, and dark shadows hung beneath his eyes. He had been stationed on Velmoris Prime for just under 4 weeks. A temporary assignment, technically part of a diplomatic medical exchange, an old agreement meant to maintain goodwill between human settlements and Zethri territory. But everyone on base knew it was a leftover formality from a war neither side liked to admit happened. The truth was simpler. This place was a dumping ground for soldiers that no one wanted to deal with anymore. Riker hadn't asked for the post, but after losing 2 colleagues in a shuttle explosion on Norex Station and requesting reassignment, his transfer was approved without delay. What he hadn't expected was how empty the facility felt. Half the wings were unused. Entire wards were unstaffed. And one patient in particular, Zethri origin, female, mid-30s by Terran count, had been left nearly abandoned. He stopped outside the door to A17, took a breath, and keyed in the access code. The door hissed open. A wave of sterile, recycled air rushed out. The room was cool, clean, dim. On the far side of the chamber, a woman sat in a reclined recovery chair, her body angled slightly toward the large observation window. Outside, the swirling gas rings of Velmoris shimmered in faint silver-blue arcs, almost unreal in their motion. Sahira didn't turn her head. She hadn't the last 2 times either. Patient File 019-B, Sahira Veth Zhao, former high-ranking officer in the Zethri Dominion Strike Guard, once considered a symbol of beauty, power, and fertility within her caste. During a recon op in the Alaris Belt, she suffered trauma to her pelvic and spinal systems. Post-op reports confirmed irreversible damage to reproductive systems, partial nerve degeneration in the lower limbs, and a 60% loss in muscle response. In Zethri culture, that made her useless. Riker approached slowly, his eyes scanning the biostats hovering in low-light projection above her bed. They'd been static for 3 days. No real signs of deterioration, but no improvement either. "You missed 3 doses again," Riker said, voice steady but firm. Still no response. He stepped closer. Her robe had shifted, still ceremonial, violet with golden lining, but the fabric now hung loose on her frame. Her arms were thin, the muscle loss obvious now. Her long, pale silver hair lay uncombed across one shoulder. Her skin, once said to glow with Zethri phenomenal health, looked cold, dry, discolored. "You're not eating either," he added. "The automated logs say you sent your meal trays back untouched." She finally spoke. They smelled like metal. Her voice was quiet but sharp, like she was unused to hearing it herself. Riker set his kit down and pulled out a sterile glove. "That's the protein polymer. It's standard on long-term care stations. It's not food." He knelt beside her chair without asking, adjusting the base of the leg brace on her left side. The straps had been cinched wrong, probably by an untrained med drone. "You adjusted this yourself?" She said nothing. "If you over-tighten this brace, you'll cut off circulation. That'll kill the tissue graft. Then you'll lose the leg." Still no response. Riker removed the straps, worked silently for a moment, and replaced them. He saw the bruising along her thigh, old, deep purple, fading to yellow. She hadn't reported those. Probably didn't want to. Pride was one of the few things she had left. "You should have told someone," he muttered. "No one listens." He glanced up. "I'm listening. You're Terran." He didn't argue, just secured the brace and sat back on his heels. "They stopped sending nurses to me," she continued after a pause. Didn't even bother to deactivate the monitoring bots. Just walked out. Riker's jaw tensed. How long ago? 3 rotations. He stood slowly, turned toward the observation panel. He didn't say anything at first. The rings of Elmoris turned silently outside. Always beautiful, always out of reach. Do you want to walk again? He asked finally. No. Why? If I walk, they'll ask if I can still serve, if I can still breed, if I'm worthy of a position. And when I can't give them the answers they want, they'll discard me again. But this time, they'll do it legally. You're not property, Riker said quietly. In Zethri law, I was a designation. Assigned, wedded, evaluated, and then retired. And you accepted that? I didn't know I could question it. Silence stretched between them. He studied her face. There was something there, beneath the bitterness, beneath the fatigue. Not anger. Not yet. But the start of something. Maybe clarity. Maybe grief. He'd seen it before in burned victims who woke up in new skin and didn't recognize themselves. I can help, he said. Sahira looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Her silver eyes didn't blink. Why? Because you're not broken, and you're not alone. Her mouth twitched like she wanted to speak, but couldn't trust what might come out. I'm not here to fix your past, he added. I'm here to stop you from losing the future too. She exhaled. Not agreement. Just breath. But her posture shifted just a little. Her shoulder dropped. Her chin no longer braced in tension. Riker stepped back. Tomorrow, we start therapy. You don't get a choice in that, he said. She didn't respond. He walked to the door and paused. You're not a burden, Sahira. Someone just told you that enough times until you started believing it. Then he left. The door slid shut. Inside the dim room, alone once more, Sahira looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. She curled them into fists and sat back slowly in the chair. She didn't know if she trusted him. But for the first time in days, she wasn't counting the hours until her vitals flatlined. The rehabilitation room smelled faintly of coolant and antiseptic. Clean, but impersonal. Just another modular compartment tacked onto the orbital facility. There were no windows here. Only muted walls, a ceiling-mounted emitter casting a soft daylight glow, and a padded bench in the center. Sahira stood near the wall, bracing herself on parallel bars. Her posture was stiff, and the brace on her left leg emitted a subtle whine as it adjusted her balance. She hadn't spoken since arriving. Dr. Riker observed her from a few paces away. Arms crossed, eyes sharp but calm. He'd expected resistance. What he didn't expect was the silence. No anger, no protest, just a cold, quiet compliance that worried him more than any outburst would have. Are you in pain? He asked. She adjusted her grip on the bar. No, you're overcompensating on the right side. I know. Shift weight to center. She tried. Her face didn't flinch, but the strain in her shoulders gave her away. He stepped closer. I'll assist with the posture, he said, placing one hand gently on her lower back, the other lightly on her shoulder. She stiffened. Not from pain, reflex. Don't touch me like I'm fragile. You're not, he replied calmly. I'm adjusting your alignment. She said nothing but didn't move away. The session lasted 20 minutes. By the end, sweat glistened on her forehead. Her hair clung to her temples. She was breathing harder, but her eyes stayed steady, focused on the exit like she was measuring the distance in case she needed to escape. When it was over, Riker handed her a towel and stepped back. You did well, he said. I didn't fall. That's not the same thing. She finally turned her head to face him. Don't patronize me, doctor. I'm not. I'm recognizing progress. She blinked once, clearly unconvinced. He decided to try something else. You haven't asked why I'm here, he said. Does it matter? It might. She gave him a faint nod, barely perceptible. It was enough. Earth Command reassigned me here after an incident on Norik Station, he said. Till my team died. I didn't. Sahira studied him. You volunteered for this? I requested somewhere quiet. She hesitated. And this is what they gave you? They thought it would be a favor. Was it? I haven't decided yet. He let the silence settle, then asked, why didn't you file a complaint when the Zethri staff stopped showing up? She exhaled slowly, as if the question tasted bitter. Because I already knew the answer. That you weren't worth their time? That I embarrassed them? The perfect soldier, the model wife, the cast ideal. Her jaw tightened. And now I'm just a reminder of what they don't want to see. Riker stepped closer. Then look at me when I tell you this. I'm not here out of pity, and I'm not following orders. Then why stay? Because someone has to treat you like you still matter. Her throat moved. A breath caught halfway between defiance and something she couldn't yet name. Maybe uncertainty. Maybe the first crack in her armor. She turned her face away. My husband hasn't contacted the station once. Not even for a status update. Does that surprise you? No, but it still cuts deeper than it should. Riker picked up his tablet, inputting her progress. He didn't press further. There was enough vulnerability for one day. But as he turned to leave, she spoke again. Doctor, he stopped. I've been told all my life that my value is tied to function. What I can offer. Strength, loyalty, children. That was the contract. Now, there's nothing left to trade. He turned, calm and direct. Then maybe it's time to stop trading. Start choosing instead. Her eyes locked onto his, uncertain but not dismissive. He nodded once. Same time tomorrow. She didn't answer, but she didn't protest either. That evening, back in his quarters, Riker sat alone. The light from his data screen cast a dull glow across his face. He reviewed her records again, every scan, every chart, every note. A few things didn't add up. Scar tissue inconsistent with the reported injury. Signs of long-term microfractures. Malnutrition predating the incident. It wasn't just a battlefield injury. It was a slow, cumulative break. Years of wear. Neglect. She hadn't been discarded because she was broken. She'd been breaking for a long time. They just chose to abandon her when the cracks became visible. He leaned back his chair, arms folded behind his head, eyes on the ceiling. This wasn't just recovery. It was reconstruction, and he had no idea if she wanted to be whole again. But tomorrow, he'd show up anyway. The storm hit just after midnight. Velmoris Prime's upper atmosphere funneled solar winds into violent geomagnetic interference. The orbital station's lighting flickered as emergency generators kicked in. Alerts lit across multiple sections, but most personnel were already in secure sleep pods or off-duty. One corridor after another locked down automatically, except for the rehab wing, which had no active security assignment logged. Dr. Mason Riker had been awake when the storm warning pinged. He sat in the dim glow of his desk screen, reviewing patient compliance data until the power flux rolled through the walls like a silent tremor. The lights browned out for half a second. Then auxiliary mode activated. He exhaled and stood. Protocol required a physical check of any patients in critical recovery when environmental conditions changed. That meant Sahira. He didn't bother calling ahead. The comms were scrambled anyway. As he walked the darkened hallway, he wondered how she would respond to the power loss. Sahira had mentioned once, briefly, almost offhand, that silence reminded her of being transported back from the front. In recovery units, with no lights, no voices, just the hum of containment units and the sound of her own breath. He reached Ward A-17. The lock was already disengaged. He paused. The door wasn't just unlocked, it was slightly open. Inside, emergency lights cast a faint red hue over the med chamber. And she was gone. He scanned the floor instinctively, then turned, just as the door to the recovery corridor slid open behind him. Sahira stood there. She was barefoot, hair unbraided, damp from a quick rinse, wearing a thin, short silk slip he hadn't seen before. It was pale ivory, traditionally worn by Zethri women during private bonding rites, clothing not issued by the station and certainly not meant for medical use. The hem stopped mid-thigh, revealing the healing grafts on her leg. Her skin shimmered faintly under the red lights, highlighting the sharp lines of her collarbones and the fresh scars along her side. Her hands were clenched at her sides, not from fear, from tension. Riker didn't speak. Not yet. She stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. I had a thought, she said, voice low but steady. If I'm no longer expected to serve anyone, maybe it's time I decide who I want near me. He stayed still. She looked past him toward the bed. Then her gaze returned to his. You're the only one who looked at me without measuring what I could offer. He replied carefully. I didn't expect you to come here tonight. I didn't expect to still feel anything. He took a breath. You don't have to prove anything, Sahira. I'm not trying to. Then what is this? Her voice faltered for a moment, then steadied. Curiosity, loneliness, and a need I don't want to apologize for. Riker's stance softened, but he kept his distance. I won't take advantage of this, he said plainly. Her expression flickered, disappointment mixed with relief. She looked down briefly, then crossed the room slowly, sitting at the edge of the bed, one leg folded under the other. You won't have to, she said. I didn't come here to be rescued. Riker stepped forward finally, sitting in the chair across from her. Then what are we doing? We're both trapped on a dead station. Neither of us has a future on the paths we were on. Maybe we make something different, even if it's just for tonight. Her honesty was disarming. No seduction, no games, just plain truth spoken in a voice that had forgotten how to beg. He looked at her long and hard, and then said, All right. They didn't touch. Not yet. They just sat in silence while the solar storm rattled the walls. Outside, the rings of Velmoris blurred from ion interference. The entire station shook once, then settled. And for the first time, Sahira didn't feel like an afterthought. She wasn't in someone else's plan anymore. She was in the middle of a choice, hers. And Riker, despite his silence, stayed right where she'd wanted him to be. Beside her. No more, no less. But enough. The lights returned by morning. Quietly, without alarm. Emergency mode powered down in stages, and a warm white glow replaced the red cast over the station's walls. Systems rebooted. Doors resynced. The storm had passed, leaving only static in the comm channels and a thin film of ice around the outer hulls. The orbital staff logs marked the event as non-critical. Inside Ward A-17, the bed was undisturbed. The blankets barely moved. Sahira hadn't slept. She sat at the edge, elbows on her knees, eyes fixed on the floor. Her slip still clung to her from the night before, the silk creased and damp from where her skin had pressed against the sheets. Her thoughts were loud, even in silence. Not regret, just recalibration. She'd let herself step forward, and now she wasn't sure what she'd stepped into. Across the room, Mason Riker returned with 2 thermal flasks. He offered one without speaking. She accepted it without looking. They drank in silence for a few seconds. He leaned against the metal frame by the door, watching her, thinking. I stayed, he finally said, voice low. I know. You didn't ask me to. I didn't need to. He nodded. She sipped the drink, lukewarm, slightly bitter. Synthetic tea, standard ration. It didn't matter. She looked at him over the rim of the cup. Are we going to talk about last night? He shrugged slightly. Do we need to? I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. I'm not pretending. She set the cup down. Then what now? Now, Riker said, standing straight, you walk. She stared at him. That's what you're thinking about. Yes, because that's still part of the deal. Your recovery, your choice, your pace. A silence stretched between them again, but different this time. Not resistance. Hesitation. I don't want you to think I came here to seduce my way out of treatment, she said. Riker's voice remained steady. I don't. I've never had this kind of freedom before, she admitted. Everything in my life was dictated, clothes, movements, who I belonged to, even how I was supposed to grieve. He walked over and crouched beside her, not too close. Just enough to be level with her eyes. You're not performing for anyone now. No protocols. No expectations. If you want to scream, scream. If you want to collapse, collapse. If you want to walk, I'll be there. She looked down at her legs. They don't feel like mine. He didn't answer that. Instead, he reached forward and gently touched her knee, just enough for her to feel pressure. Then let's take them back. They spent the next 2 hours in the rehab room. No nurses, no staff. Just Riker and Sahira. He supported her without carrying. She limped, staggered, cursed once under her breath. He only corrected her form when absolutely necessary. Her frustration showed in small bursts, sharpened exhales, clenched fists. But she kept moving. At one point, she lost her balance and grabbed the bar too hard. The motion strained the tendons in her shoulder, and she gasped, folding in on herself. He stepped in quickly, bracing her back with one hand, gripping her wrist with the other. "You all right?" She bit her lip. "Not at once." "I'm not weak," she said through clenched teeth. "No," he said. "You're healing." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation, and she appreciated that. Later, in the corridor outside the med unit, she walked alone, just a few meters slowly, steadily, without the brace. Riker followed close behind, but didn't interfere. It was the first time she'd walked without assistance since her discharge from active duty. When she reached the wall at the end, she stopped and turned. Her face didn't show pride, just awareness. "I think I want to live again," she said. He nodded. "I think I'm ready to leave this station. Eventually. We'll figure that out," he said. "One step at a time." She looked at him with something new in her expression, something lighter. Then she asked, "Do you think they'll come back?" He knew what she meant. Zethri's staff, the commanders, her husband. "They might," Riker said. "If they do, then you'll decide who gets to speak to you." She let that sit for a moment. "All right," she whispered. For now, she wasn't ready for the world beyond the station. But for the first time in weeks, she wasn't waiting to die. She was preparing to stand. And beside her, Riker said nothing, but stayed exactly where she could see him. Still, quiet, present. That was enough for now. The comms came back online 2 days later. It was subtle. First a soft chime on Riker's datapad, then a status light blinking green on the medical terminal. Data logs began syncing. The automated system spat out delayed status updates, resupply requests, and incoming personnel manifests. Most of it was routine, except one item. Incoming transport, Zethri diplomatic courier, vessel ID 717 AZ. Eta Amasaspios. No prior notice. No purpose stated. No personnel list. Riker stared at the log for a long time before locking the screen. He didn't rush to tell Sahira. Not yet. When he entered the rehab room that morning, she was already inside, walking between the support bars unassisted. Her robe had been replaced with standard station fatigues, too large, but serviceable. Her movements were still slow, but more stable. Intentional. She noticed a change in his face before he spoke. "What is it?" He hesitated. "A Zethri vessel's en route. Arrives by shift's end." Her jaw tightened slightly. "Did they say why?" "No." She looked away, eyes narrowing, lips pressed thin. Not surprised, just calculating. "Is my husband on board?" "No manifest." "Then it's him." Riker didn't argue. Sahira stepped away from the bars. Her balance wavered, but she caught herself. "I need to be prepared." "For what?" "For the performance." He won't want honesty. He'll want obedience or contrition. You don't owe him either. "I know. But if I show anger, he'll report emotional instability. If I ignore him, he'll claim disrespect. If I say nothing, he'll speak for me." Riker watched her. She wasn't panicking. She was planning, like a soldier before battle. "What do you want from me?" he asked. She met his eyes. "To remind me who I am when he tries to make me forget." He gave a single nod. "Then we start now." They worked for hours. He coached her posture, voice control, breath regulation. Not as a medic, but as a steady hand. When her knee trembled, he steadied her. When she froze, lost in some memory of hierarchy and protocol, he said nothing, just waited. At meal break, she sat across from him in the staff lounge. The first time she'd joined him outside a med chamber. Her tone was level. "I used to believe I was chosen, groomed to represent something greater than myself. My body, my skills, even my emotions curated. I didn't think it was control. I thought it was purpose." Riker listened. "When the injury happened, I expected him to protect me. Instead, he said I'd tainted his lineage." Riker's voice was calm but firm. "That wasn't a husband. That was a handler." She nodded slowly. "Now I see that." That evening, as the Zethri ship docked, Sahira changed into her ceremonial robe, freshly cleaned, gold trim repaired with makeshift stitching. She asked Riker to braid her hair. He did, silently, hand steady, focused. She watched him in the mirror. "I never had anyone do this for me," she said softly. "Now you do," he replied. When the docking bay doors opened, Sahira stood with her shoulders back, chin high. Riker at her side. She walked under her own power. The figure who emerged from the Zethary ship was exactly who she expected. Tall, ornate uniform, expression unreadable. Varnith, her husband. He didn't greet her by name, only offered a slight bow. You look functional. She said nothing. I came to bring you home. I'm already home, she said. He raised a brow. You belong to Zethary law. I belong to no one. Riker stepped forward, but she raised a hand, stopping him. Her voice was steady. You abandoned me. You left me without care, without status. You revoked my caste name. You were unfit, Varnith said, and now I see how much that freedom is worth. Varnith's tone turned clipped. You've been influenced by these Terrans. No, she replied. I've been healed by them. There was a pause. Then he turned, as if the conversation was over. If you refuse repatriation, I will file a claim of dishonor against you. You can file what you like, she said, but you will file it from off this station. Security watched silently from the edge of the corridor, unsure whether to intervene. Varnith looked at her one last time. You'll regret this. She didn't blink. I already regretted being yours. He turned and walked back toward his ship. When the vessel disengaged, Sahira didn't speak for several minutes. She leaned against the cold wall outside the airlock. Eyes closed, breathing slow. Riker stayed beside her. Finally, she opened her eyes. I didn't shake. No, you didn't. I didn't even want to hit him. That's progress. She smiled faintly. I think I'm free now. Yeah, Riker said, voice low. You are. They stood there in silence as the shuttle lights disappeared behind the curve of Elmoris. Whatever came next, it would be hers to decide. The days that followed felt different, unstructured, unpressured. The station was quiet again. No diplomatic shuttles, no senior staff visits, no messages demanding Sahira's return to service. Just the soft pulse of atmospheric stabilizers and the low rhythm of daily maintenance cycles. For the first time since her injury, Sahira wasn't reacting to something. She was choosing what to do. Riker watched her adjust to that freedom gradually. She began her mornings early, before the lights brightened, walking slow circuits of the corridor outside the medbay. Not because anyone told her to, but because she needed to feel in control of her own movement. When she passed him on his way to check the diagnostics, she didn't look away anymore. Sometimes she even nodded. By the fourth morning, she was waiting for him outside the rehab room. No exercises today, she said simply. He studied her face. All right, I want to see the greenhouse. I heard there's one in the unused wing. Riker raised an eyebrow. It's locked. Restricted after the last supply contract expired. Can you open it? He nodded. Yes. Then come with me. They moved slowly, Sahira managing well on her own, though her right leg still lagged slightly. Riker walked beside her, but didn't hover. She didn't like being shadowed. The greenhouse hadn't been accessed in months. Dust clung to the control panel, and the air inside was damp and stale. But when the doors slid open, filtered light from the artificial skylights poured in, illuminating rows of still-living plants, mostly Earth-native crops, engineered for off-world growth. Lettuce, chard, basil. Two lonely sunflowers stood crooked in the far corner, their heads drooping toward the floor. Sahira stepped inside and stood still for a long time, breathing in the smell, warm, loamy, alive. I haven't smelled dirt in over a year, she said softly. Not synthetic air, not metal, just earth. Riker watched her carefully. She ran her fingers over a leafy stalk, then knelt beside one of the beds. My mother used to grow herbs in clay pots. She wasn't military, just an artisan. She said soil remembers everything. She's still alive? Sahira shook her head. Died in a flu wave when I was in command training. Riker crouched beside her. You miss her? Every time I remember who I used to be. They sat on the floor of the greenhouse for an hour. No schedule, no equipment, no protocols, just quiet. At one point, Sahira asked, what will you do when your assignment ends? He considered. I don't know. I stopped planning after Norex. Now I wait to be told. But you're not a soldier. I was, before I became a trauma surgeon. My field unit was wiped out in an ambush. I was the only one who walked out. I patched myself up with a med pack and kept walking until I collapsed at a checkpoint. She looked at him. That's not in your official file. It wouldn't be. The story makes me look too human. Silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. You don't act like someone who wants to be saved, she said. He smiled faintly. Maybe I don't need saving. Just someone who sees me when I stop moving. Her gaze held his. It didn't drift away. Later that day, she asked for access to the station's main interface. She wanted to send a message, not to the Zethary, but to a former comrade who she'd once trained with and trusted. Someone outside the noble caste. Someone who might respond without judgment. Riker granted the request. That night, over dinner in the lounge, she asked him a new question. Do you think we're here for a reason? He chewed slowly before answering. No, but I think what we do here can still matter. I think I want to stay longer, she said. Not because I'm not ready, but because I want to learn what it's like to live without fear. You think that's possible? I think it's worth trying. When they finished, they walked back to her quarters together. Not close, not apart, step by step. At her door, she turned to him and asked quietly, Would you stay? He didn't ask what she meant. He just nodded. That night, she let herself sleep. Fully, deeply. And when she woke the next morning, she didn't feel broken. She felt ready. Sahira's recovery was no longer measured by distance walked or muscle response. It was in the way she carried herself through the station, upright, unguarded, deliberate. Her gait still bore the memory of injury, but she didn't hide it. She wore it like a badge, not a weakness. Everyone who passed her, few though they were, noticed the shift. She began joining Riker during his rounds. No official reason, just quiet company. Sometimes she asked about the cases he reviewed. Other times, she said nothing and simply observed. He didn't object. Her presence made the sterile walls feel less hollow. At night, they shared meals in his quarters. She cooked once, an improvised dish using rehydrated greens from the greenhouse and stored protein packs. It wasn't good, but he ate all of it without comment. She noticed. The next time, she adjusted the seasoning. There was no declaration between them. No confessions. Just time. Shared, not scheduled. Each evening they spent together deepened something neither of them felt the need to label. That changed when the Earth Federation issued new orders. A resupply ship was inbound. Along with it, a team of replacements. Riker's temporary assignment was officially concluded. He was to report to command for reassignment within 72 hours. He received the transmission at 2 o'clock. Didn't tell Sahira until morning. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked, Where will they send you? I won't know until I arrive. Will it be another war zone? Probably. She stood in silence, staring out the corridor viewport. The gas giant hung in the distance, still, massive, indifferent. I thought we had more time, she said. So did I. Then she turned to him. Don't go. He exhaled. I'm under orders. I know what that means. I live by them. I can't just walk away from it all. Then don't walk away from me. He blinked. She'd never said anything like that before. Never spoken with fear in her voice. But now she did. Just a sliver. Just enough to make it real. I was discarded because I couldn't produce something useful, she said. But with you, I'm not something to be used. I'm something to be chosen. He stepped closer. You are. She looked up at him. Then choose to stay. He didn't answer right away. His mind ran through protocol, obligation, discipline. But in the end, none of it felt heavier than the truth she'd spoken. I'll talk to command, he said. See if I can stay on Velmoris permanently. There's no reason not to. They're pulling medical operations back here anyway. She nodded slowly, uncertain. He added, And if they refuse, I'll refuse too. You're not the only one allowed to choose. Her relief showed only in her shoulders, less tense, less braced. She closed the distance between them and placed her hand on his chest. If I had met you before all this, I wouldn't have recognized you. I wouldn't have been ready, he said. That evening, they returned to the greenhouse. The sunflowers had turned slightly toward the artificial light, one standing taller than the last time. They sat between the rows. No conversación. And for the first time, Sahira took his hand without hesitation. No performance. No protocol. Just choice. 3 weeks later, Velmoris Prime Orbital Station received its final status update. The Earth Federation approved Mason Riker's request for permanent reassignment. Officially, he was placed on indefinite medical oversight duty for low-volume trauma intake in Outer Colony Sector 9. Unofficially, everyone knew it was an excuse. There were no major patients here anymore. No political function, no active threats. Just quiet. The kind of place people disappeared to when they'd earned the right to stop running. The day the approval came through, Riker didn't celebrate. He didn't tell Sahira right away. He just walked the long corridor to the greenhouse where he knew she'd be. She had started spending her afternoons there, tending to the plants, learning the rhythms of artificial sunlight and hydroponic timers. A former war officer, now reading manuals about soil chemistry and synthetic pollination like she had a future in it. He found her kneeling beside one of the planters, fingers darkened by soil. She didn't look up when he entered, but she knew he was there. "Is it official?" she asked. "Yes." She sat back on her heels. "So, what do we do now?" Riker leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "Whatever we want." It was a strange sentence to say aloud, one that held more weight than either of them expected. For people like them, freedom had always come with a cost, and the right to choose hadn't been part of the deal. Not until now. She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. "I've been thinking," she said. "I don't want to be a patient anymore." "You're not." "I mean, I want off the registry. Off the rotation. No more check-ins. No more charts. Just me." He nodded. "We can do that. I'll clear your records. Reclassify your file as closed." She stepped closer. "Will you keep a copy?" He tilted his head. "Of your file. Of my scans. Before and after. I want to remember what I survived." His eyes met hers. "I already saved them." She smiled faintly. "Good." That night, they returned to his quarters. Not as doctor and patient, not as protector and survivor, but as two people finally stripped of every label. Sahira stood by the window while Riker packed away his medical case, shelving it in the far cabinet where it would gather dust. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Of what?" "Of this. Us." He turned toward her, serious. "I am terrified." She let out a small breath of relief. "So am I." He walked over to her, close now, close enough to feel the warmth of her body, to see the lingering scars across her collarbone. "But I'm not going anywhere." Her voice dropped. "Neither am I." In the days that followed, they fell into a rhythm. Sahira began cataloging the greenhouse contents, requesting updated nutrient solutions from the next supply run. Riker opened a civilian wellness log, offering basic treatment to a handful of off-grid workers who occasionally docked on the station for repairs. They weren't busy. That was the point. They shared meals, shared silence, shared space. No promises were made. None were needed. Weeks later, a small Zethary courier ship requested docking clearance. Routine patrol, flagged as diplomatic. Sahira watched the notification appear on the terminal, then deleted it without a second glance. No anxiety, no flash of old fear. She had made her decision weeks ago. She belonged to herself now. That evening, she found Riker in the greenhouse, adjusting the lighting angles. "You still hate basil?" she asked. "I've accepted it," he said. "Mostly because you keep growing it." She sat beside him, cross-legged on the floor. The lights dimmed slightly as night mode activated. "You know what I realized?" she said. "What?" "If everything I lost hadn't happened, if I were still in uniform, still perfect, still untouchable, you and I would have never met." Riker's gaze stayed on the sunflowers. One of them had bloomed fully, bright yellow, taller than both of them. "And if we had," she added, "I wouldn't have looked at you twice." "That cuts a little." She smiled. "I'm saying I wasn't ready to be human. Not then. Not until I broke." "You didn't break," he said. "You stopped pretending." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Same thing." They sat there until the lights shut off completely, leaving only the soft glow of starlight through the ceiling panels. No words, no movement, no need to explain, just peace. And for two people who had once been built for war, peace was the most foreign and most welcome thing of all. Their story didn't end with declarations or dramatic escapes. It ended with presence, with two people who finally chose each other. not because they had to, but because they could.